last week I cut this quartz crystal and designed this polar bear into it. So what I was trying to do is really, I don't like to waste any of the quartz crystal. I really love the way the quartz is, and I like it as a really solid mass. And when you start making little thin areas of it or extended places, then it has a tendency to break off and can be very wasteful and expensive. So I try to keep the forms that I work with in crystal solid and so on. And so I designed this as a paper stencil. I just do a quick little rough in to get the sense of proportion and so on. And then I apply it to the quartz. So it's kind of like that, and then I rough in, and then I make a proportional adjustment. So this is how it's going to sit right here. Sit like that, looking down on the surface. I'm going to add something else to the bottom here. I haven't quite decided yet, but that's sort of part of my process. I like to work through these things as I go. But it's going to have the shine of the labradorite and then the quartz crystal, which will be detailed, and it just needs a bit more emphasis on the underside. Okay, so let me show you how I work on the interior part, because the grinder I was working on earlier just does the outside. And so what I like to do is define the form, and I just use a pencil here to define the form, and I know this is the shape and elements of the design that I want to emphasize. So I work it out in pencil, and I know I want to show that belly as a ball inside there, so I'm putting that in. Put the line where the eyes will go. So I kind of started it over here as well as a pencil line. So I like this piece. It just feels right to me, and I think it's kind of a creative piece. I think it's going to be very nice in the setting here. And it gives me what I want from the quartz. It gives me this big chunk of quartz, and when the light goes through it, it's going to refract and be really very brilliant in finished concept. So I got to think of that in the finished concept, and then the character of the piece that I want to portray here. So yeah, it's creative, and it took me a little effort to get into this piece when I started, because I was in kind of a rush. I wanted to cut that quartz, but I was a little afraid to cut it at first. So I kind of had an anxious moment or two. Well, before I cut the quartz, it's always, really hard to cut this beautiful natural shape. And I always want to make sure, if I'm going to do that the piece is worth the cut of the quartz. So always sort of anxious about that. So that brings to mind what I want to talk about today. And the question I asked is, what are the three things that create the creative blocks, or could create creative blocks? And the mistakes that we as creative people make that prevent us from being more creative. So one of the things for me has been this idea of, cutting the quartz, and I didn't want to make any mistakes, so I had to be very, very particular about the design. So that was one thing. So it's actually a state of mind. So you want to keep your state of mind clear when you start projects. Very, very important. So that's one aspect of it. But let me show you what I'm doing here with this. I'm going to move to a diamond bit on my flex shaft. I'll show you how I do that. I'm going to put a brand new bit in there, because I've been using this bit now for about 15 minutes, and it's dull. I have to change the bit up again. So these things cost me, I don't know, about $15 each, and they last sometimes 15 minutes. So like $1 a minute for the grinding of these things. especially on quartz, like I said, it really dulls the tool. Now let me get my glasses here. Okay, so what I want to do is work on the interiors. And I need a little water. And I'm going to make some noise when I turn this on. And maybe if Curtis stepped on this side of me, then the noise might be a little less for the camera. I'm just going to demonstrate to show you how this works. So you see, what I'm wanting to do is to keep the form compact, and I don't want to open up this interior here and give away any negative space, because if I make a hole in there or I make a hole in the neck, it's going to create a whole lot of work to open that space up. I'm going to come close, I'm going to come in tight and define the form, but I'm not going to open it up into a totally 3D thing here, because first of all, it's a challenge to get into those tiny little spaces, and I don't really think it's going to affect the design all that much more. So I like it as a compact form. It adds a nice sense of design to the whole feature, and I kind of think it's a little funny, you know, I mean, like humorous here, and I like that. And it's kind of dynamic with this great big ball of quartz on the back end here. So that's what it is. Polar bear, and he just sits nicely on top. So he'll be cool when he's finished, pretty sure. I'm never sure till the very end. So, you know, the question I asked today about what prevents us from being creative is kind of a general question, is because, you know, I really believe the answer to being a successful artist is your creative output. Like, how creative can you be? And the people that are the most creative have the most success. People like their work more. That's just how it is. it's interesting, and so the point is, like, how do you stay in that sort of mode? How do you stay creative all the time? How do you make every piece that you're working on like your best and most creative and most interesting? So I think that's really the challenge as an artist that works every day and has all kinds of different pressures that affect them throughout their life and day. So, you know, the things, like I said, the mindset where you can be frustrated or angry, have a lot of self-doubt, or you can have arrogance as well. And you think of it, both aspects of that mindset, the self-doubt and the arrogance, are kind of the same thing. They prevent you from being aware and focused on the neutral ground. So the self-doubt is, oh my God, I can't do it, or I'm not good enough. And the arrogance is, you know, I'm so good, I don't have to deal with these issues, and you miss the point, really. So the neutrality, I think, of the mindset is the most important when you're working in a creative mode and you want your best results. So to really, you know, this is a piece that I've been working on really for quite some time. I started designing it maybe 2 years ago. And so this is the smoke scene for this Genie project. And so the other part about being creative is like giving yourself the time. And so, like, I've got a really good client for this piece. He's a friend of mine. And he says, you know, just take your time, do what you like, and just take your time. So I only work on this when I really feel good with myself, and I know that there's challenges in this material that I'm working with, and so I always have to have the right sort of mindset around it. I don't need to be rushed. I don't want to be rushed. There's no need. I just do it as I feel that it works well for me. And so far, I'm really pleased with the way it's happening. I'm just really cleaning up the interior parts of this a smoke scene. There's going to be a little lamp here, like where the smoke's coming from. And it's really a design job. So it gets made. I can't make it in advance. I can't make this kind of abstract form and then reproduce it. It has to come from a sense of me. You know, I'm working with the tools, I'm working with my own sensitivity to the material, and keeping in mind my sense of design. So I have to have clear mindset. I'm giving myself the time so that I have the patience to work with this stone. And so this is the outcome. And I'm sure this is going to be finished in a very, very short time because I've got most of the form in place. I need more muscle structure and so on the back of the Genie, and this is cleaning up nicely and finding the lines. So that's the thing. When the other third solution to being creative throughout your day or throughout your studio time is not to be too judgmental about your process. Now, what do I mean by that? Like, how do you be creative when you're not judgmental about what you do? So let's think of it in terms of comparing what you did in the past. So if everything that you tried to be creative with today, you compare to the past, then you're making a judgment of good or bad with the subjects you made in the past. So if that's the case, you're always going to be in the past with your designs. You're always going to measure up to the past. You're never going to be able to step forward into something new and different, because if it doesn't match your past expectations, then the new idea or new concept won't have the light of day. You won't be able to let it come forth. So this was a new idea. I'd never done this before at all. This is a completely different concept for me. So I worked back and forth with it a lot, and I used my creative process that I've developed, and I let the design flow. So the idea is to just be comfortable. Be comfortable with new ideas. Never reject a new idea. And I think really the best way actually is to keep a notepad, a sketchbook, something like that, because when you're designing new pieces and you want to be creative, these ideas are going to flow all the time. They're going to be coming to you all the time. And if you don't keep a notepad, then you can't ever, come back over them and think what might be the best or the newest idea. So that's what I always do. I use a sketchbook, and I always keep, even if it's just the slightest little twinge of an idea, I make a mental note of it in my sketchbook, or I'll write a mental reminder in my sketchbook about what the idea is that I want to do. So that's the 3 tips for today, is to keep your mindset clear when you're being creative. Give yourself the time to do the work, and try to be less judgmental about your process. Never throw out a good idea, because you don't know if they're good ideas until you try them. So always be willing to step forward with something that's completely different than you've ever done before, and try not to judge it on things that you did in the past. Okay? So if you've got any other things that will, you think, block your imagination, I'd love to hear about it. So post up on the comments if you've got something that blocks your creativity. I'd like to hear about it. So put it up on the comments, and I'll get back to you and let you know what I think. Okay? So thanks for being with me today, and stay creative.